The 12 months since the COVID-19 pandemic officially began on March 11th has been full of grim milestones. In a year, a hug went from a warm greeting to a health hazard. We were forced to separate from our friends and our family. Some people worked on the front lines, some people worked from home, and others couldn't work at all. And although we've followed the case counts and curves that explain the pandemic's progression, its toll is unquantifiable, and those we've lost are irreplaceable. As we mark the one-year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic, we should acknowledge our struggles, but we also need to take action now on the lessons we've learned during the pandemic to make sure that we have a good plan in place to move forward and prosper emotionally, socially, and financially. Because if we've learned anything during the pandemic, it's not to put off until tomorrow what we can do today.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kathy Brost, and joining me today are my colleagues, Thurs and Sue Hickey. Today we'll be discussing how to move forward as we emerge from the pandemic and how to thrive with our family and finances. As you may recall in part 1, we discussed the impact the pandemic had on women and families. In part 2, we focused on finances. And today, in the third and final part of the episode, we will discuss our thoughts on how we can set ourselves and our families up for a successful future. According to a recent UBS poll, the pandemic has prompted 64% of women to discuss money more frequently with their partners, and 51% of women tend to talk about inheritance with their kids. This is a positive trend that we hope will see grow.
Today, we will discuss 5 important facets of most families' financial picture that we feel should be a top priority to review, discuss, and revise if necessary. We'll start with estate planning, financial planning, insurance, retirement planning, and then discuss gifting strategies. We will also discuss several items on the legislative agenda that we at Legacy are watching very closely because if enacted, it could impact your retirement and your estate plans.
Now, the cost of COVID looks to be bringing consequential changes to tax law that make an estate plan review now even more important. The crisis has resulted in government support to the economy that likely will increase and expand estate taxes. As an organization, we've had our ear to the ground since the election, and from everything we have heard from our professional colleagues and read in the legislative proposals, there are at least 2 that alter the way taxes are imposed on estates that you'll want to know about.
The first is the federal estate tax exemption. Currently, very few Americans have to be concerned about the estate tax. However, new legislative proposals are being introduced that would expand the number of American families whose estate tax plans will incorporate estate taxes into their planning considerations. Today, the exemption for a married couple is over $23 million. That is the value of their combined estate that can pass free of estate tax. The proposals being discussed in Congress would reduce that exemption amount to $7 million or $10.8 million for couples, or $3.5 to $5.4 million for individuals. The second possible change relates to the tax treatment of capital gains at death. The basis or cost of assets owned by the individual are currently allowed a step-up on the owner's death. The beneficiary is given an adjustment in the basis to equal the value of the asset at the decedent's death. That step-up essentially erases the tax on any increases in value that the decedent otherwise would have paid if they had sold that property. This provision applies to estates of all sizes and taxpayers of all levels. The consequence of eliminating the step-up in basis would have a large consequence on almost all beneficiaries, thereby affecting a broad swath of American families. These are only 2 of the changes that are currently being proposed in Congress. The bottom line is this. If COVID didn't convince you to dust off your estate plan for a review, maybe the cost of COVID relief will. Keep in mind that you may want to review your estate plan sooner rather than later in order to take advantage of the current tax code before any changes are enacted or take effect.
We are often asked, What is the best advice we can offer on financial planning? I believe it's the same advice that hundreds of individuals gave in a recent survey where 98% of the female respondents urged other women to participate in financial decisions, to participate in long-term planning, and to get involved early on. An unexpected pandemic that closes businesses, shuts down schools, and increases working hours for those in essential jobs exposes on a much wider scale the consequences of leaving key decisions to someone else or leaving them until later. It's important to be involved and to be aware so you can make smart choices for you and your family. If you want to achieve well-being in your life, your home, your career, or community, it's important to know how you're going to accomplish your goals. For individuals looking to take an active role in their finances now, we suggest first to identify your financial priorities by examining your liquidity needs, your longevity needs, and your legacy needs, and then prioritizing inside of each of those categories. On the screen, you will see how respondents in a recent survey rated the importance of each of these. For liquidity needs, 91% of the respondents said an adequate emergency fund is most important to them. For the longevity needs, 86% said long-term care planning was most important for them. And on the legacy, 71% said that having a good estate plan was very important to them. To get started, we recommend first to assess how your finances may have been impacted by the crisis, while recognizing it's never too late to get started in financial discussions and taking steps to do so regardless of your prior level of involvement. We recommend that you look at your entire financial picture, develop a budget, calculate your net worth, and identify any shortfalls. Do a stress test. Take a look at how your finances could be impacted in worst case scenarios. For example, a market drop of 20% or a sudden and unexpected job loss. In those cases, what would you live on? What are your savings and your reserves? And where would you draw money from if the unexpected should happen? Talk openly about your financial situation with your partner or spouse if you have one. If you have children, talk to them about money and teach them healthy financial habits, especially while they're home and they're young. There's certainly a lot to think about, and you don't have to do this alone. Consider connecting with your trusted financial advisor to get started on your plan now.
The pandemic has really highlighted the need for insurance. Not only the need for good health insurance, but also the need for disability, life insurance, and long-term care insurance as well. Having a good understanding of all your insurance coverage has never been more important. So now is a great time to do a thorough review of your insurance coverage, including reviewing and understanding your health insurance and disability coverage for both short and long-term disabilities. For life insurance, you should have enough insurance coverage to cover all of your debts, mortgages, loans, credit card debt, but also adequate coverage to allow your spouse and dependents to continue their standard of living in the event of your death. Term life insurance is generally used to provide coverage for short-term needs, like paying off loans or providing for your minor children. Whereas permanent life insurance, like universal whole life, is generally used to provide coverage for needs that will exist regardless of when you die, like providing income for your spouse to live on or paying estate tax. Tax laws have changed over the past couple of years, and the Biden administration is proposing to adjust both income and estate tax laws for high-income earners. These proposals make irrevocable life insurance trusts more attractive for those individuals who have over a few million in net worth. As we discussed in our finances section, many women suffered financial hardship during the pandemic and no longer feel that their retirement savings will be enough to last them throughout their lives. Recent tax law changes have also drastically altered retirement plans such as IRAs and employer-sponsored plans such as 401ks and 403bs. If you stop making contributions to your employer-sponsored retirement plans or IRAs during the pandemic, make sure that you start making contributions again. Having automatic contributions made directly from your paycheck is the easiest way to save for retirement. Be sure to contribute enough to make up for any contributions that you may have missed during the pandemic. If you changed jobs during the pandemic, remember to take your 401k or retirement plan with you. Consider whether consolidating your retirement plans into an IRA is appropriate for you. Many employers offer both a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k to pick from. Consider whether it's appropriate for you to contribute to a Roth 401k or IRA at this time. Roth 401ks and IRAs offer potentially tax-free distributions in the future. Generally, it's advantageous to contribute to a Roth if you think that your income tax rate will be lower now than when you plan on taking withdrawals from that account. Whereas it's more advantageous to contribute to a traditional retirement plan or IRA if you think your income tax rate now is higher than when you plan on making withdrawals. Review your overall financial plan to ensure that your retirement savings plan is sufficient to support your standard of living in retirement. Increase your contributions and review your investment strategy if it's not.
Review and update your beneficiary designation for your retirement plans and your IRAs as well. If you currently have a trust listed as a beneficiary, meet with an estate tax lawyer to make sure that the trust has been properly updated to reflect the changes to retirement plan distributions requirements. Distribution requirements have changed so that your non-spouse beneficiaries, such as your children, will be required to take and be taxed on the entire balance of your retirement plan within 10 years of your death, rather than spreading distributions over their lifetime. Think through and consider the tax effects of these changes. The age when you are required to begin taking distributions has also been pushed back to age 72. You can start taking distributions earlier, but you must begin taking them by age 72. Please note, however, there's current proposal to extend the age of required minimum distributions to 75, and we will continue to track this. Also, the percentage that you are required to take has been lowered to account for longer life expectancies. So now is the time to review your retirement savings and make sure you understand how these changes will affect you and your family, and that your retirement savings are on track to support your financial goals. In addition to the estate tax and retirement plan changes, there are also proposed changes to the rules on how to transfer wealth during your lifetime in the form of a gift. Restrictions are being introduced to limit the amount a person can give away during their lifetime, free of transfer taxes, from $11.7 million to $1 million. When considering estate plan modifications, in order to take advantage of the current estate tax regulations, gifting strategies should also be included in the discussion. In many ways, this can be viewed as very good news. The current regulations permit gifts to be made more strategically, and the higher limits are still available. Gifts can be made now using trust to benefit the recipient over a longer period of time, with the protections that can be built into a trust. This allows the use of larger exemption amounts to be gifted now to heirs who may not be ready for outright gifts of that magnitude. There is another often overlooked benefit of gifting a portion of your estate while living. You have the incalculable joy of watching the people you love enjoy the gifts you leave them to enhance their lives at a time in their lives when they need it most. It also affords them the opportunity of learning how to manage wealth and incorporate it into the values you've taught them and want to pass on to future generations. Finally, we all saw how important charities are when our society was in crisis. Statistics show that most people who were able increased their charitable giving during the COVID pandemic. The understanding of social and charitable responsibility of the wealthy is behavior that can be taught and reinforced to your children and your grandchildren. By acting as a role model and in your current gifting and incorporating a charitable component in your estate plan, you can pass on your values both in how you give and to whom you give.
There has certainly been some great information shared on estate planning, financial planning, protecting family and assets, retirement planning, and gifting strategies. But we all know plans are not one and done. We should revisit our plans often to make sure that they still reflect our wishes and that they take into consideration any new laws or tax updates. During President Joe Biden's first few months in office, he's already made some significant economic changes, including on March 11th, signing into law the extensive $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. As the Biden-Harris administration continues to execute the plans that they outlined during their presidential campaign, at Legacy Private Trust, we are preparing for possible tax changes. There is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to gift and estate tax planning. What is appropriate for you and your family depends on many factors, including what your objectives are, your family circumstances, and assets, to name a few. As we consider the possible changes ahead, we are looking for ways to help our clients take advantage of the historically low tax rates. We are also helping clients prepare by stress testing for potential tax changes, the same way that you may stress test for a down market. In addition to the headline news regarding estate taxes that we discussed earlier, there are also a number of lesser-known proposals that we all should be aware of.
In addition to those that we've already mentioned, here are some new proposals that we're also watching. Rising tax rates. Currently, the top federal tax rate is 37%. President Biden has proposed adjusting that top tax rate back to 39.6%, which was the top tax rate prior to the 2018 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Well, there will be pressure on both sides to bring down some of the other tax brackets or adjust the threshold. You should be aware that the current tax rates are scheduled to increase in 2026, and that it's unlikely that any new legislature will lower tax rates for wealthy taxpayers. So we advise our clients to plan accordingly. Social Security taxes. FICA taxes are used to fund the Social Security system. Currently, employees pay taxes on up to $142,800 of their income, and that amount is adjusted annually for inflation. Employees pay 6.2%, and their employer pays another 6.2%, for a total of 12.4% under the current system. There are new proposals which, if adopted, would apply the FICA tax on income earned over $400,000 as well. Under this proposal, high income earners would pay 6.2%. Self-employed people would pay both halves for a total of 12.4% on their earned income over $400,000. But it's not all bad news. One proposal reinstates the ability for taxpayers to deduct 100% of the state and local taxes that you earn for federal income and estate tax purposes.
Will any of these proposals be adopted? Will some, but not all of them, be included in a bill that's designed to gain the necessary votes in the U.S. Senate? No one knows for sure, but we do know that we need to be prepared.
Ultimately, at Legacy, we are watching these proposals closely and are already preparing for a variety of possible tax changes that could occur and taking steps to ensure that our client plans aren't blindsided by any of these potential changes.
Legacy's team of advisors work hard to provide sophisticated, highly personalized wealth management, trust, and family office services. We focus on providing solutions to the financial challenges that impact successful individuals and their families. Our goal for this Women in Wealth series is to share our knowledge and expertise to help women take charge of their own finances and to give them the tools that they need to thrive as well as we all come out of this pandemic. Thank you for joining us in this first episode of our Women in Wealth series. We hope you found it helpful and will join us for our upcoming episodes.